You're listening to the Entrepreneur's Agony Aunt podcast, keeping it real, telling the story like it is, because there are no mistakes that somebody else hasn't already made. Hello, I'm Vicky Brock, and welcome to what I have arbitrarily decided is Series 2 of the Entrepreneur Agony Aunt podcast. It feels like Series 2. Partly because I've had a few weeks break from recording and promoting the podcast over the summer, and secondly because I find myself deeply back in startup mode. A bit like buses, you wait around for a year for the right idea to come, and then 4 come along at once. And being opportunistic, I've said yes to all of them. So if Series 1 of this podcast had the luxury of deep reflection, I suspect Series 2 will have a higher adrenaline level and the view from the trenches. So joining me this week is Alex Feechan, founder and CEO of Findra Clothing, an award-winning outdoor adventure clothing brand. Having searched extensively for clothing that was high performance and comfortable and looked good, she found that there was very little available for women like her. She realised she was perfectly placed to fill the gap in the market and took more than 20 years' experience at the sharp end of the fashion industry and her first-class degree in design and textiles and an MA in fashion, and she knew she could do better. Findra was launched to market in December 14 and has gone from strength to strength. So welcome to my living room, Alex. I'm super looking forward to hearing about your adventures and trials and tribulations.
Thanks for having me.
So I've picked a question for you. We've been asked this before. We've been asked this face-to-face when we were on the same panel. So when this one came by again in a slightly different form, you sprang to mind. This listener is also interested in fashion, and they have identified a gap in the market that fills their personal needs and feel that there is a wider market than just an audience of one, which is always a risk. They've been getting kickback because it's being perceived as a bit too niche, and so they've struggled to raise any money so far. Now, the question they asked me is, how do they raise the money they need to get started? But I hope we're going to answer a different question, because saying you don't is going to be a really short episode. So I'm hoping we're going to answer a slightly different question, the real question, which is, how do you get started with an idea? How did you get started with an idea without kind of immediately making your first task go raise money for a year or 3?
Yeah. So I think for me, my attitude's always the best way to do something is to do it. So you start by doing. I'm very into the outdoors, so I basically got involved in mountain biking and got pretty hooked on mountain biking, really loved it. Went out with a group of women each week and just really loved the sport, loved the attitude. It's not for the faint-hearted, and just liked the attitude of the women that I was kind of out there biking with and cycling with. And we weren't a young group, we were a group of women in our 30s, kind of early 40s, which I thought was really interesting. And so because I was really into it, I went off to buy some kit basically and wanted stuff that would be good in the Scottish weather and all that it throws at us.
Our beautiful endless sun, you
absolutely.
mean?
Well, this year's been a bit of a one-off, I think, but certainly just stuff that could cope with mud and rain and all of that stuff. And went to my local trail centre, had a look around and kind of stood in the shop and thought, oh, this is not really great. The percentage of clothing available for women was a tiny percentage, and just because of my background in design, I quite quickly kind of assessed what was going on, and that the women's product was really clearly an afterthought of the men's. So it was obviously a market or a sector in that market that wasn't being kind of properly addressed. And I kind of stood there and probably went away actually and looked at other places, went to other sports places and just didn't find anything that I thought for that particular sport was great, and for women of my age and for what we were doing didn't think there was anything great. Went back to the trail centre and kind of looked again, and then in that moment thought, I really believe I could do something a lot better here from a design point of view, but also from a kind of just a brand that would really have an ethos that was like the spirit of those women that I'd been cycling with, that was, you know, a really positive and go-getting kind of attitude. And so at that point, I believed that was when I could do something better, and thought, okay, where do I start and how do I start? And for me, I had a lot of experience in design, so I felt, right, I know how to do that. I understand that process. So really what I don't have a lot of experience in is understanding the market and the market that I'm looking at going into. Interestingly, at the same time, I'd kind of received an email from Scottish Enterprise, who they'd sent out an email to whoever, lots of people I'm sure, who they basically asked the question, do you have an idea for a product or business related to mountain biking? And it was very timely because it kind of arrived as I was having the thought process of creating this brand. And they were offering innovation clinics. And so I went along to that and met with the team that were behind that. They had also identified at that point that the market sector for mountain biking had a lot of potential, particularly in Scotland, linked to tourism. And so I kind of put forward my idea to them, and that I had at that point wanted to establish a women-specific clothing brand. And they really kind of embraced that and loved it. And so through them, I had an opportunity to understand a bit more about the market by getting access to kind of key market reports, Intel reports. And also knew very early on that this journey that I wanted to go on, I wanted to build a brand that I wanted to build a business that wasn't a lifestyle business. I wanted it to be a business that I believed would be scalable, and therefore a brand that would really grow. And so even without a huge amount of market knowledge, I knew that I was starting in a niche, but I knew that I wanted to grow out with that.
But I mean, niches can be insanely valuable.
Absolutely.
I mean, just because something's niche doesn't mean it's not scalable, doesn't mean that it's not a global business, and doesn't mean that it's not a £100 million plus kind of businesses.
Absolutely.
Niches, especially, I mean, obviously in the consumer world, but also in B2B. I mean, niches are what you're searching for. It's extraordinarily hard to be a competitive success as a generalist.
Well, it is. And I think if you have got a niche and you start in a niche, you've got a great story to tell. You've got a great starting point. And these are all really good positives, because how do you make your mark or make your path in a very noisy world, particularly the clothing industry? It's really, really competitive, and you're going to compete with some huge players. So how do you, as a tiny little, a non-existent brand at that point, and one person, how do you make your voice heard? How do you get your brand out there? And so starting in a niche where you've identified an opportunity is a great place to be. And I had identified an opportunity, and I had identified a market within that wasn't being served the way it should be or could be. And that's where my story started, really, and that's what I built on.
And I think it's really important that you went away and, Scottish Enterprise helped, which is always, a fantastic resource, I think, that we're lucky to have in this market. In other locales, you often have similar types of resources, whether that's community groups or libraries or at university or whatever. That piece of desk research is so critical.
Yeah.
I do bang on about this a lot, but I bang on it from personal experience and from meeting people like you. So much of the de-risking of your idea can be done on paper.
Absolutely.
Literally in an Excel spreadsheet. Are there enough other, is it a market of one, as in me? Or is it a market of 1,000 or 100,000?
Absolutely.
And where are they, and how will I get to them? And is it possible to achieve this, in a linear way, or in a scaling way, or in a gently organic way? However you're choosing to do it, is it possible to get to the market? Is there enough of them?
It's crucial to ask all of those questions and really understand all of that, and really understand who that market, who the customer is, what's going on in that market. And for me, when I had that moment of, right, I want to do this, one of the very first things I'd done was then to start to really kind of observe what people were wearing. So when I went out biking, I would look at what are people actually wearing, what are women wearing. And at that point, we were all wearing the same colour jacket and black shorts and tops. And so, there was clearly not a great deal of creativity had gone into it, and not a great deal of choice. So at a very, very basic level, just that observation of, right, what's actually happening, and then just communicating, asking people, okay, what brands do you buy? What do you think of it? And for me, just kind of gathering that information, and also then combining that with, in terms of the design and the creative side, what's involved in the activity, what do I really want, and what type of product do I want to wear for this activity. But a lot of that then fed into the design of the product. But finding out about the market is it can start as simple as looking at the market. So I have had at that point the opportunity to be at a trail centre every weekend and see my potential customer in action, and then take it from there and do that desktop research, as you say, and just looking and reading and sort of sitting down every evening, because I had a full-time job at the time, so I was just spending the evenings reading, looking at other brands, looking at how they'd grown, and just doing all that work. And I found it really interesting, actually. And at that point, there is no cost. You're not having to pay anything. You're not having to do anything other than your time.
It's no cost, but you're doing the most important thing. You're de-risking it. You're making an informed decision for yourself whether you should invest your time, your money, your heart and soul into this or not. Starting comes at the end of that process.
Yes,
I think. The last year, it's crazy. I'm doing 4 now, but the last year I have done that with so many things.
Yeah.
So I must have done 25 where I have given serious consideration to actually kind of having written them down, gone and put in effort to looking at something. Mostly I've ruled them out because I'm not the right person to do the business. Yeah. Some I've ruled them out because it's already being done and frankly I'd be so late to market that I just don't think the niche is big enough. And some I just couldn't get enthused about. And now it's come together that I've got a couple that I'm just really super into. And in theory, in an ideal world, I wouldn't have a couple, I'd have one. Yeah. But I'm lucky that I know enough people, right? Yeah. I've got a couple of little teams I trust. I wouldn't be able to do multiple businesses by myself. Yeah. And it is different. The first time, I think when you start by yourself, it's different. When you start again, it's a team sport almost from day one.
And you've learned so much.
Yeah. But all of that process, only when you've done it are you starting.
Without doubt, and really understanding what you're getting into. I couldn't afford to take a big risk. I was on my own bringing up my 3 sons. I had a good job. I liked my job. I had this sort of, the security of the financial security. And in a way, it was almost like, am I going mad by coming up with this idea and wanting to pursue it? But that itch just didn't go away. And so in order to kind of mitigate some of the risk, the research was the most important thing for me, to really, really fully understand what the market was all about and what the potential was within that market.
Because you have the technical, creative and production skills to know that if you can find the right problem, you know how to solve it. Is that fair enough?
Pretty much. I mean, I would say for me, there were 2 sort of key phases prior to launch. The first was validating the idea. Was there a market and validating that concept? And then for me, it was about creating products, designing products, creating prototypes, and validating my designs, because validated, right, there is a market opportunity and women actually really do want better design product for cycling, the outdoors. So that bit was kind of like, right, okay, that's validated, but now do they want my designs?
Yeah. So
product market fit.
Or problem solution fit. Yes. The often bit which is less sexy and skipped. I've done it myself. I've done all the first part of the research beautifully well. Yeah. And skipped that next piece.
Well, it's terrifying. I mean, when I started Findra, or hadn't started, pre-start, in the bit that we're talking about, and I designed my products and my ideas, or I had the ideas and I had the creative side of it, decided to do a focus group and take my kind of storyboards and my prototypes along to the Mountain Bike Centre of Scotland Centre, put them all out there. We'd organised, promoted it as a day to come along and give feedback. And, I've been in the fashion industry for over 20 years. I've done numerous presentations, and I wanted to hide in the back room that day because this was my baby and these were my designs, and if they weren't well received or it wasn't constructive criticism, then that little bubble was burst.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to hear that, but I knew I had to put myself in that position, and that was really, really hard, and that's with a lot of experience.
Yeah.
I was pretty terrified, and it was a really positive day, and not just positives as in everybody loved it. There was a lot of really constructive feedback, and what I really learned there was you cannot in any way presume what the customer wants. You can't think because of your own interpretation of a market or a product range or whatever that what you think is right is right. And so all of that was really great feedback and information to get before you go and start to get the money out, you know.
And what were you presenting? Were you presenting drawings or mock-ups?
So there was some garment mock-ups, some prototype garments which people could try on. There was fabric swatches. I had various storyboards which had, so I was thinking about the name of the brand at that point, and I had kind of lots of different terms and names, and just pinned to a kind of a board, and also an imagery board. So lots of different images of women cycling, women outdoors. And I basically got people to put little post-it notes against the ones that they liked, and it was really interesting. So the things that you think, oh, that's an amazing picture, that looks really great. Mm-hmm. If I was to kind of create a range and then do a photo shoot, would I go around that? You know, I would build a story around that. That would be the one that no one would put a dot on. You know?
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting lesson, you know.
And it's funny because, I mean, obviously my background is a lot more tech, but that piece is so important. And I think often we, especially in the tech world or the product side of things, we kind of make the excuse of the MVP. Oh, well, this is just an MVP. So what I'm going to do is throw an MVP out there, which is way harder than it sounds. I mean, like, building a tech MVP, a real, especially if you're doing B2B or enterprise, that's a whole ton of work. Yeah. And you've already made so many arbitrary decisions about what the customer wants at that point. And rolling it right back to that, you know, and understanding what people are gravitating towards. It's such a skipped stage, actually.
I think it is, and I think it's a fundamental part of just what you have to do. And when we come on to kind of the part at which where I launched Findra to market, that background work, that groundwork really paid off, because when it got to market, the product that I created and took to market wasn't like anything else that was out there, but it was successful because I had really, really listened to the customer and really kind of pulled all of that information together. And, you know, it was a case of giving them what they wanted, with my influence in terms of design and styling, but giving them the product that they had been looking for and asked for. And that definitely came out of the research and the kind of putting on the brave kind of like, let's just put it in front of people now and ask the question. Yeah.
And it's fascinating that you chose to do it the way you did with the focus groups, which I suspect we're broadly similar age, I think have desperately gone out of fashion. I mean, earlier on in my career, especially when I was working in research, we did a lot of focus groups. You know, they're not where you would go to for quantitative research, but for certain kinds of things done well, they're very good. Yeah. And they've really dropped out of fashion. And I think that I can imagine a lot of accelerators that I come across and a lot of startup programs, they'd have said, get a pop-up store. Yeah. You know, take a pop-up store for a weekend and get all your products out there and, you know, just start selling and see what people buy. And actually, I think that's really reductive, and that you probably wouldn't have ended up with the brand you have, the product range you have, the feedback you got, had you taken that approach, because you'd have already made so many arbitrary decisions.
Without doubt. And I think that you're also having to invest in the money part of it has to start being there at that point. You have, even in a small amount. To developing a product is not a quick process. To get it right, you have to take your time. And I wasn't prepared to go to market with something that was not made properly, wasn't considered, wasn't well designed, and wasn't kind of what the customer wanted. I just was not prepared to rush that. I didn't need any money to pull together prototypes. Mm-hmm. I didn't need any money to put stickers on a board. Yep. I just needed my time and my input and passion for the whole thing, and to get a group of people together and to get that feedback. And it has gone out of fashion, I think, as you say. I think that people do want to fast track everything. That's the world that we live in. And I would say to anyone that's kind of starting a business, you know, with a product, whatever that product is, really validate it. And I think you can get so close to something that you can really believe that what you're offering is amazing and right and perfect. And then all of a sudden you're shot down in flames because you've not thought about it from a different angle, or you've just got too close to it and you can't see it for its flaws or whatever. Yeah. So it is a crucial part of it.
Or it's just not as big a deal to everybody else as it is to you. Like, you've actually validated everything. Yeah. You have solved the problem. Mm-hmm. It's just you were a market of one.
Yeah. Well, that kind of happened actually, because I had this absolute fixed idea that cycling shorts needed to have the button a really simple thing, like we needed to have the front placket, the opening had to move to the side. Because when you're on a bike, you know, and you're leaning over, it could pop, the button could pop, the zip could pop. I was fixated on this idea, and I thought I was going to transform the whole industry with my idea of moving the zip to the side. And so our products on that day were kind of designed around this. And I don't think there was anyone on that day that tried them on and got on the bike or saw them. I don't think one person said, that's a great idea. I think everyone just said, it's not a big deal, just make sure your pockets are stronger. As in the studs on the pockets, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, okay then.
People have wasted millions and years of their life to learn that lesson.
It's so unnecessary and such a waste. And it's about kind of dropping the ego a little bit as well, and just putting yourself out there and putting your idea out there. I mean, don't get me wrong, as a designer, I'm not someone that likes to design by committee by any means, but as a starting point, when you've got an idea and you want to enter a market, it is a really good exercise to go through and kind of really forces you to kind of step back a little bit and detach yourself a little bit from it and just remember that when it goes out there, it's what the customer decides at the end of the day, and that's important.
Yeah. I mean, I built something the other week. I didn't build it in just a week, but I presented something the other week that I built for a business I've been really involved in, and this has been my baby. And I built this thing, and I knew what it should look like, and I was trying to fix a lot of things I've got wrong in the past.
Yeah.
This was like there was like deep meaning in this kind of like dashboard. Yeah. If a dashboard can have profundity, this like had it. And then I sat down with the marketing team, who represent exactly the kind of people that were looking at it, and they go, well, it'd be really great if it had like the key numbers at the top where you could see them. I mean, and I was like, they're there! And I was just trying so hard to zip it, because there they were in a table, like the very first thing, who got all these numbers, but they were there in a row, and clearly people just weren't seeing them, and just listening to this feedback, especially of this thing that I like felt super proud of, and then going away, like grumbling a bit, thinking, marketing people need bigger boxes. But, you know, I put them in bigger boxes, and I thought about it, and I presented it much more clearly, and I came back, and then they understood. And it's not about me.
Yeah, that's
it's about them.
Exactly. And it's about, you know, just making it work for that person that you've intended it for.
So you did your focus groups, some of your lovely concepts shot down in flames,
yes, absolutely.
But presumably other things came through strong and validated. Yeah. What kind of happened next?
So I kind of, with regards to the product, went back to the drawing board and took away all of the learning from that particular day about the type of brand that I wanted to build and what I felt was really missing in the marketplace, and what these women were telling me, the way it should be presented to them, how it should be presented, things like the kind of the words that you would use, or the photography, the imagery that you would sort of choose to use to represent the brand. I went away with a wealth of knowledge on all of that really informed and shaped the type of brand that I was going to start to build, from our kind of values and our ethos and what we wanted to kind of create to the product, basically, and the design and the detailing. When
it moved then from concept and brand to actual product, at what point did you feel that now you had really started? And at what point did you then have to start to wrangle with money and materials and all the stuff that terrifies me about the whole idea of retail product and building things like that? Because they kind of seem to, in my narrow understanding of the space, involve money first and selling later.
That is a major
and I don't like that way around. I much prefer selling first and then...
That would be a great world if we could all live in that. But retail, and I think when you're creating something from scratch, you're creating a product from scratch, you have so many parts of the process before you get to the retail part of it. And I understood all of that because of my background as a practicing designer. So I knew that we had a long time frame, you know, a long process lead time from concept to getting it on the shelf, basically. And so initially I'd kind of gone to fabric suppliers and got some sort of cut-offs of fabric. That was the starting point. Then I'd got some prototypes made, which I took to the focus group day. And then following on from that, I kind of created a really small capsule range, and that's really important as well. As a creative person, it would be natural to want to create this massive range and showcase all of your wonderful designs and how talented you were. That's, we would all love to live in that world. But I just knew that we had to go to market with a really tight little product range and test the market. And it was testing it. Even once you got the feedback on the product, it was then testing it, because once you get into the world of designing, prototyping, and then placing an order to buy, you're starting to look at minimums and all of that. So it was like little baby steps. And so I went from creating a small range, designing it, getting some offcuts of fabric and getting prototypes made up. And I basically had what I would call a prototype / salesman sample range of probably five pieces, basically. So 2 tops, leggings, a pair of shorts, and an accessory, which was a neck warmer. And I had this range, and I kind of had to, like, even from the colour choice and where you launch it from, I had to be quite clever in how I approached it, because again, just from that kind of supply chain process, I was limited to what I could do and what I could work with. So I had to be quite creative and clever about what I created as a range, and the raw materials I used and the colour palette and all of those things. And I went from there, and again, going back to kind of some of the support I had, the next step for me was I went on a kind of trade mission out to Eurobike, which is in Friedrichshafen, with the Mountain Bike Centre of Scotland, and they took a small group out there, a small group of businesses, and they had a stand out there. And I literally had a reel on a stand, and this is one of the biggest, largest cycling and bike shows in the world, basically, and everyone kind of gathers there in the summer to see the latest product offerings. So all the big brands are there. It is absolutely massive, and I had this tiny little reel, and I had my samples on it, and I had a mannequin outside the stand with some products on it. I had no expectations as to getting lots of accounts opened or selling, but I wanted to put it out there. The next thing was to put it out there in front of the industry and see what the response was. And the mannequin really attracted lots of people to the stand, which was brilliant. And the products that I designed stood out. They were different. They were different from a lot of what was being offered by a lot of the bigger brands. They were different from basically what was in the market. And so because of that, I got a lot of industry interest and a lot of people coming and asking about the brand and asking about the products, and got quite a few write-ups. And, you know, at this point, I'd spent my cost of my flight out there and my accommodation. So, you know, we're talking 500, 600, 700 quid that I'd spent. I didn't have anything else to spend. I'd got a grant to help me make the products. But really, that was it. And so getting the industry interested, that was a really positive next step, and getting some pieces written up sparked interest and gave me the confidence then to come back and say, right, I need to now get a stock run of each of these items and go to market. And that was the point at which, right, how do I fund that? What do I do to make that happen? And that's when you really sort of sit down and go, okay. And I'd kind of I had chosen suppliers at that point that could make really small runs. That was really important part of the process as well, and a really challenging part of the process because it's difficult to find them.
And that's interesting. I mean, the person asking the question, and I hope they'll forgive me with me so liberally rewriting their question to what it really needed to be, is this wasn't a question of raise money and then start thinking about all of this thing. No. You, just to reiterate, you're about £800 down at this point. Yeah. You have validated the whole thing. You have validated the market. You have validated the brand. You have learned a whole load about your designs, the concepts. You have gone to the biggest trade show in the world. You have shown those prototypes. You have got the entire industry going, wow, this is a bit different. We like this. And now you're thinking about the point where you actually need to spend money, which is to make a production run. I mean, how many months in?
That was a year.
That was a year. That kind of feels like about a year.
That was a year. Yeah. That's a full year from the moment I stood in the shop to doing the research to the next stage to get into it. Right, okay, now how do I do this now?
And it's so interesting that the fact that it is a year in, I see so many startups that don't start and founders that never found because they spend that first year worrying about raising money.
Yeah, it's a huge distraction.
It's a massive distraction. And you're not going to succeed.
No.
You know, every once in a while there'll be a crazy Kickstarter or crowdfund that gets the interest, and it captures people's imagination. But those are very, very few and far between. And every once in a while, you'll get an insider or a friendly angel give you a punt. Mm-hmm. But even those can often be problematic later on. Yeah. The money that comes into a concept before you've done any validation is problematic money.
Definitely.
When you...
Too soon.
Yeah, you either then have to build what you took the money for, even if it turns out that the validation isn't there, or you have to find yourself in this crazy place where the money is pulling you in all the directions of what you should be building instead of your customer.
And I think that it's a really nice phase, actually, that research. There's something quite satisfying about doing all of that research and really understanding what you're getting into and understanding your customer. So to me, it's actually, looking back, it was a nice period of just understanding all of that, because once you do move into the next stage and you do have to start to look at the money, then there are more pressures that come. So the more that you can do and the further along the line you can get by yourself, in as much as you're pushing it, but you have support networks around you. But the more you can do to understand where you want to be, what you want to do, the more value you add as well. So that when you do come to have those conversations about money, you actually have something strong and solid to talk about, and you validated that.
Obviously, you'd validated the demand. There was potential sales channel demand. You needed to start producing yourself. Did you very clearly at that point kind of see yourself as a brand that was going to be selling through other outlets, or did you your own e-commerce and your own sale channel as the primary channel at that point in time? Was that at the front of your radar? So
I think that the vision that I had was that we would be a brand that sold online, and because I really believed in the brand and how I wanted it, I'm quite protective of how the brand is represented, and I think that's important. It's important to me, because what I found in the marketplace was that the kind of the way other brands were represented or whatever, I didn't find it particularly inspiring. So I wanted to be able to represent the brand positively and strongly, and make sure that when it was out there, it was represented properly. So the vision at that point was online selling in potentially our own retail, but quirky and quite different, because obviously going down the road of bricks and mortar is a huge, tricky area and potentially hugely risky.
Yes, my goodness.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But for me, it was about getting our brand message out there. I wasn't against wholesale at all. I wanted to, that was definitely something that I knew that we would look at, but as much as possible ensuring that we partnered with people who would represent Findra in the way that I visualised it.
I know you have a strong team around you now, and you have investment around you now, but when you were kind of walking into that path for the first time, when you went out and sort of found your chairman, for example, how did that all come about? Were you deliberately seeking certain skill sets that you felt you didn't have, or were these all part of an existing network?
It was important to me to work with people who understood me and understood the vision and bought into the vision, and believed in the vision and believed that I was the person that would take that forward. So it was a real people thing. I knew that it was important to have people that brought something to the business, and not just financially, but brought other skills and experience to the business, because I'd never done this before. So I knew that there was a lot to learn, and that I didn't know. So I guess, when I started that whole process, I didn't have a great experience early on, and that was kind of, those people came to me, but I very, very quickly kind of worked through that and worked out it wasn't right. And the day that we were on the panel, we talked a little bit about this, and for me, something that's consistent throughout my whole experience as the founder and running Findra is my gut instinct.
Oh yeah.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
And when you don't listen to it, you look back and think, I knew I should have done whatever, said whatever, thought whatever.
Yeah. Every one of the biggest mistakes I've made, my gut was right at the time.
Yeah.
It's just whether you listen to it or you're in such a place of anxiety, stress, and self-doubt, actually.
Absolutely.
There are certain types of people and there are certain types of situation that whip you up into such a state of self-doubt. Yeah. You overrule your own gut, and that's when I've made my biggest mistakes.
And I think you've got to learn to trust it. I've certainly, in the last few years, got better at that. You know?
And it's not, I mean, I don't know whether it's a female thing or whether it's more of a general thing when you're doing this for the first or second time. A lot of times you think that to trust your gut must be arrogant. Like you're not listening to other people, you're not taking on other feedback. You should be more humble and not assuming you're right and that you know everything. Mm-hmm. And whilst there is some truth to that, you need to be teachable and you need to learn. You can't overrule when your gut is screaming at something, is encroaching on your values.
Yes.
I think that's the thing. It's when it's coming into the territory of you as a personal being and what you and the business that you've created stand for. Yeah. Your gut's the thing that's screaming out, warning you that there's a threat to the core value.
There's a threat. And
that's not arrogance.
I don't think it's arrogant at all. And I think the challenge is that it's almost like you can't quite explain it. It's that's when you question yourself, because it's like, well, I can't quite put it into words what I'm feeling here, but there's just something about this. It doesn't feel right. I'm not comfortable with it, or I don't like it, and I don't think this is the way forward. And when you continue down that path, when you've felt that, but you continue down that path and whatever unfolds, and you look back and you think, I should have listened. And I had that experience quite early on, and with regards to investment, and it was definitely a strong gut feeling that just said no. And on paper it didn't work out. It wasn't right either. And I just walked away from it. Mm-hmm. I just very politely walked away, and it was one of the best things that I could have done.
Absolutely. And I think you feel it in a very physical way, that relief afterwards when you've made those decisions that are in line with kind of, it's almost like, it's like your moral and your value compass is just all lined up, and the tension that goes out of you when you've made that horrible decision. Yeah. And it's funny because I think you talk about people that get you, and I think that's when you find the right people, is that you don't have to dig yourself into a hole trying to explain that. Yeah. They understand
and
that
they respect
this
that.
Is it. Yeah. When you find people that don't get that, that's when you get all you're emotional or unstable or difficult or contrary or all the other nonsense you get thrown at you.
It's not helpful, and doesn't take anything forward. So it's kind of try and avoid those types of people as much as possible.
And I think as you get more confident and more experienced in it does become easier.
Yeah, definitely.
To own the skin you're in, really.
And trust, as you say, just trust that instinct. And I think I've learned that when I start to get that feeling, and it is a feeling, it's a physical feeling, and you just start to question things, it's kind of stepping back and thinking, right, what exactly is it that I'm seeing here? What is it that's going on that I'm not sure about, I'm not comfortable? And kind of stepping back a little bit and just kind of taking stock. And sometimes, well, for me, I go out on my bike, and that helps me to think, and you kind of pull it all together and you think, okay, and you have to allow yourself that time, and not in that time doubt yourself or criticise yourself. Just step back a bit, look at what's going on, look at what it is that you're unsure about, and then have a bit of time to think and kind of pull it together. And even the ability to kind of do that has come about over the last few years. I've saw myself as a person evolve to allow myself to be able to tap into that, and understand it, hopefully, more. Make better decisions, if you can.
Brilliant. So what's next? What's next for the brand, the business, for world domination?
World domination. So yeah, we have grown steadily year on year. This year which I've always found quite amusing, we introduced a men's range. So pretty much, from the moment we launched to market, we were asked to do a men's range. We had guys buy our product. There was one guy, that I think very first male customer actually, who bought one of our tops and didn't actually ask me. It was at an event I was at in London. Didn't say is this women specific or anything, but I thought the kind of posters and things that we had, the banners, would have made that clear. But again, being presumptuous or assuming things. And it was about 2 months later that this guy emailed and he said, I've just kind of realised you're a women's brand. Is it okay for me to wear this top?
Oh, that's just lovely.
I know. And it's like, yes, if it fits and you like it and you're happy, go for it. There's nothing stopping you. So yeah, pretty much from the start, we were asked to do men's products, and I just found that really interesting because you think, well, there's massive options out there for men in the outdoor clothing industry and cycling specifically, but what we had created, what the Findra products were all about, obviously appeal to men too. So this year we've launched men's, and that's going well. And for us now, we're just about growing the business, growing sales. I feel, the first, we're in year 4 and there's so much to do in kind of those start-up years when you're kind of getting things off the ground, that I feel now we've got a really good team at board level and in-house. We've got great people, all of whom believe in the brand and love the product, and are people who are very much our customer. They live and breathe the outdoors, they love the outdoors, and so we're in a good place in terms of the foundations of the business. And I think that reflects where I was pre-launch, is building foundations and putting them in place and kind of just getting all of that as right as you can. There's so many challenges, as you know, and so many hurdles.
So do you feel like you're at the start line now?
I can think we might be about to start, yes.
Excellent. Yep. Brilliant. 4 years in and we're ready to start. I wish you every success. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. You've been listening to Vicky Brock and Alex Feechan, this week's Entrepreneur Agony Aunts. If you like the podcast, then do me a big favour and tell the world, who can subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and at the entrepreneuragonyaunt.com website.